This is Entrepreneur Authorities. Whether you're building a brand, scaling your startup, or getting started, get ready to be inspired, empowered, and equipped to take your next big leap. This week, I'm joined by Wes Chaar, who started his career navigating spacecraft, not social media feeds. As an aerospace engineer, he introduced AI and machine learning into deep space navigation before bringing that same predictive power into airlines, retail, and media. Along the way, he began to question what happens when the tools built to guide rockets start guiding human behavior, which led to his book, Data Independence. Wes, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again, Joe. How have you been?
I'm great. And, I want to start our conversation talking about space, because I know this is sort of like how you got here, your love of space at an early age. And I want to share that as a kid, I was never impressed by it. Like, I grew up in like the space shuttle era, and I wasn't one of those people that like woke up on the Saturday mornings to watch the shuttles take off. And so I don't know what it is, but my nephew now, who's 5 years old, is obsessed with space, knows all the planets, knows more about space than I do at my age. What is it about space that attracted you at such an early age?
Well, actually, I was always very attracted to aviation. My grandfather was a pilot with the U.S. Army Air Corps and did quite a bit. I mean, I don't want to digress in this, but I always loved, flying. I think my earliest memory, I was a kid, I would ask my dad to take me. There was a place outside the airport where we can see landings and takeoff. That was like my funnest. So it's really about aviation and wanting to be a pilot. My parents never agreed that I become a pilot growing up. So the next best thing, well, if I cannot fly myself a plane, I'm going to maybe get into navigation, and I really loved that area. So that's how, in some sense, I got to aerospace engineering and finishing up a PhD in aerospace engineering. It was really about the love of aviation and space that was there since growing up. Like your nephew, you said, correct? Was your nephew?
Yeah, that's 5 years old, knows all the planets. And it's funny, you mentioned the fact that your parents kept you from being a pilot. And out of curiosity, because you've brought this up a bunch, is there like some generational trauma to this of like...
No, there was no generational trauma.
What a different life I would have.
Yeah, I guess my parents felt, an engineer, a scientist, or a lawyer are really the careers. So they push so hard into something like this. Actually, I'll tell you a story. When I got into college, I got accepted to pre-med and engineering. And my mother, oh my God, she went down with me to school to make sure I register in med school as pre-med. And then there was part of the process where I went by myself and I went and changed it to engineering. I mean, she was like crying for 2 days straight that, oh my God, even engineering was not. For her, it was like medical doctor. So they come from this generation where a medical doctor is it, and engineering, maybe a distant second for them. But my passion was not there. My passion was really in engineering and aviation and things like that. So I followed what I wanted to do, and I have no regret. But I don't forget that day that she came down to school with me. And then when I told her when I got home, I was like, "Oh my God, what did you do?" She was crying for 2 days. I remember this.
That sticks with you, no doubt. And it's funny how you are rebellious by being an engineer. Like, I think...
Exactly. You would think I have whatever. No, but for her, they wanted one of their kids to be a medical doctor. Well, none of us kids ended up being a medical doctor. I ended up doing engineering. My sister ended up doing an MBA, and my brother ended up in accounting. So none of us went and became a medical doctor.
It's so funny for like in Western and even Eastern cultures, like the idea of rebelling against, and many cultures have this embrace of like being a doctor, being a scientist, but the fact that you were rebelling in such a high value area, it's very comical. It's almost like a sketch.
Yeah,
it's
but also they didn't understand per se engineering, more than a medical doctor. So I think it has to do with that. Yeah, but we obviously crossed that bridge. That was such a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. And you mentioned, you grew up in Beirut.
I have an American mother and a Lebanese dad. Okay. So I was born there, grew up there, and then we eventually moved to the States. That was it.
And so when you came here, because my family were immigrants too, and they struggled being first, I was first generation American, but they struggled making that transition. Were you always chasing validation? Because I know my parents dealt with this their entire lives, like feeling like they needed to prove themselves. Did you always have that sort of chip on your shoulder, or were you aware enough that you're like, hey, listen, as long as I'm doing the work, I'm going to be okay?
No, I mean, I think it was as long as I'm doing the work, I'm going to be doing okay and doing the best I can. No, I won't describe it that it was, I had to prove myself, but in some sense, I'm always trying to do my best. So it's not because of whatever. And in my case, like my kids call me, they call me the semi-immigrant Be- because, my mom is American on her side and their family. So I have family on her side that are American. And my dad obviously is the level. So that's why they call me the semi-immigrant jokingly.
That's funny. And so you geared into towards guidance, navigation,
And
and
control.
control, and that's really about precision. Were you drawn to systems because people felt less predictable?
No, actually, guidance, navigation, and control, to your point, it is about attaining precision. And when you want to attain precision, correct, in systems that have quite a bit of variability. So imagine if you're traveling in space, you have solar radiation pressure, non-gravitational acceleration. There's a lot of things. It's not just because you launch something, somehow it's going to follow the trajectory and get there. It's actually much, much more complicated than that. Yes, we do launches. I don't know if you notice sometimes. Why do they launch in particular windows? You launch in particular windows in interplanetary navigation because you're trying to be captured by the gravitational field in one planet. So when you launch, you want to go to Mars, you pick the dates. You have this window if I want to be captured in the gravitational field of Mars, but it's not Mars alone, correct? There are other planets around. There are things that are happening on the sun, and there are. I mean, so the point is, it's not. It's an approximation. It's the best thing you need to do as a starting point. But then the journey begins, and the journey begins by you collecting measurements. And the way we collect measurements, I don't know if you heard of something called the deep space stations. So the US government, NASA, has deep space stations all positioned in various places around the planet so that when something is traveling in space, you always have one of the stations able to collect measurements. And typically the measurements are two kinds. It's, Doppler measurements or laser range measurements, but basically these are the two. And then you get all these measurements and now, okay, well, what do we do? What is this data telling us? Are we on the right track? Do we need to do some correction, some maneuver, correct, to make sure that the spacecraft is on track to land on Mars? So that was the journey that I started with, and what I started with was this problem at the time posed by Jet Propulsion Lab for us at the Center for Space Research, where I used to work, and at the same time was going to school. So at CSR, the problem that we got from JPL is the following. There were budget cuts in the late 90s, in the 90s, after the United States won the Cold War. So, NASA was getting a lot of budget when we were afraid of Sputnik, correct? And then, everyone was putting money into our space program. And then when the Cold War ended, they started cutting the NASA budget, which was really sad because, NASA has contributed a lot of things into science and whatever. And the problem was the following. We have all these engineers that process the data from Deep Space Network, like a lot of engineers. What are we going to do when we don't have enough money to have as many engineers processing the data? And then the idea was the following, is actually very, very simple, after thinking about it now, at the time, it's like, wow. So what does every engineer do? Every engineer was running their hypothesis of the model based on the data. And then they compared notes and come to a conclusion together as a team. Well, what if you take the algorithms, different hypotheses of the algorithm running separately, but then let machine learning come in and be, in some sense, the gating agent of what is really making sense out of the data and what maneuver should be done. And then on top of it, did we really have the right hypothesis? Can we make those algorithms, population of algorithms, somehow interact with each other and create new algorithms? And guess what? We solved this more than 25 years ago, and
Wow.
it was tested in the late 90s in parallel to the the operations at the time of how NASA navigated. So we've been doing AI in aerospace engineering way before agentic AI today, and agents talking to other agents, creating new agents. For more than 25 years, we've been doing populations of algorithms that can interact with each other with machine learning and create new algorithm autonomously. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah,
The cool thing about the field you chose is, engineering and aerospace is like you guys are almost the first to the party. So, like, obviously engineers were the first to computers, the first to the internet.
yes,
And then now you were the first to algorithms and LLMs. Fast forward 25, 30 years, and they're omnipresent. Grandmothers and grandfathers know what LLMs mean and
yeah, yeah,
algorithms.
yeah,
Talk
yeah.
about algorithm. Tell me about when you first realized that algorithms could guide a spacecraft. The fact that like a model that you put together inside a machine could do all the work that humans were doing.
Well, NASA has been doing this for a long time. They created, all these algorithms to navigate and to put things around orbit in space, even the satellites. So we know the algorithms, but when you go into deep space, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, correct? So the idea, rather than a single algorithm with one person maybe calibrating it, is really have this population of algorithms because the environment is uncertain. The uncertainty will change, especially if you go even beyond our solar system and whatever. I mean, you need these things to learn autonomously. And that was really the key things is how to let something learn autonomously based on what you're observing. What's your best estimate? It's actually an area of mathematics called, maximum likelihood estimation. But basically, from a population of whatever, what is really your best bet? Knowing what you know and knowing that you data what you have and what you have learned along the journey on top of it, and whether actually what you have is good enough, and can you perhaps create new hypotheses? We actually solved that at the time. The way we solved it was a very interesting method. If we look at the population of algorithm, well, how am I going to create new hypothesis and I have no one, running this thing? So the way we have done it at the time is you take every algorithm and you code the parameters into a DNA sequence. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's go to Darwin's theory of evolution. What was Darwin's theory of evolution? Is that the two strongest, or attract each other typically, at least, and then they generate even a stronger offspring. Correct? Well, what if these algorithms somehow we can get them to compare notes every two in some way, and let them share what is it that they have, and then maybe create a better algorithm. And the way we've done it is actually by taking the parameter. Every algorithm has a set of parameters, code them into zeros and ones, like a sequence of DNA, let do crossover and mutation of those parameters, and recreate a new version. And actually it worked. It converges to better and better and better solution. We've done this more than 25 years ago at NASA, actually 27 years ago. Now they mention, oh my God, even 28, whatever. And these things work. So, but to your point, a lot of interesting things in science has typically started, actually, in my opinion, not only at NASA, but also with DOD, with the Department of Defense, because they're always whatever. I mean, when people talk about, location on your phone, I mean, Steve Jobs is a genius, but he didn't invent GPS. I have to correct people about that. GPS was invented in the military. He didn't invite the camera, whatever, but it was also invented in the military because after the U-2, I can't remember in which year, was shut down. Maybe I think it's in the 50s by the Soviet Union. We wanted to be able to spy from the sky with better cameras. So the point is, he put all these things. He's a great marketer. He put them all together to create the iPhone. But all of that, to your point, started either at NASA or DOD. All always pushing the envelope. Ideas and technologies always started there.
And so now there are these fierce debates going on from Silicon Valley to DC about the power of AI. And you were playing around with AI and algorithms. I think it was around like 97 you were talking about.
So 97, I finished aerospace in 96, and I moved, to your point, to the business world. So I was always following, back to what you said, the aviation. I was following the airline industry. The airline industry, not many people know this. I was actually at the frontier of using data to running their business. So after deregulation, there was, some really very smart people, in particular at American Airlines, who started this whole area of, they realized they have this data in the mainframe. Well, how could we figure out, use this data to decide where we fly? How do we manage our inventory? How do we do flight scheduling, network design, crew scheduling? They figured out that actually they have the data in the background and they can write these mathematical models that process the data. And actually the whole area of something called revenue management, which is sometimes also called inventory management, if you want, is basically a science, that's taught at many business school. What is the science? It's deciding when you have a perishable asset, like an airline seat, when to sell it, at what time, for which customer, at which price. And how do you solve this? When you have thousands of flights and whatever, it's all mathematics that actually the folks at American Airlines in particular at the time were pioneer in doing that. And I had the great pleasure actually that my first boss in the business world was one of those pioneers. His name is Barry Smith. Wonderful, wonderful guy. And I started my career there. But it's so funny. So from Aerospace, I went to the airline and I actually started working at Sabre, where Sabre basically used to be part of American Airlines. It separated to become its own company when I joined at the time of my joining. And we were consulting airlines around the world. We were doing digital in the late 90s when Amazon was selling books. Well, what do you mean you're doing digital? Travelocity was actually a Sabre company, hospitality industry, and it's all algorithmic. So I pitched an idea. I interviewed with them about some ideas I have. And I remember within even 24 hours, I got the job offer to join. And then I made the transition from aerospace to the airline world. And here I am. I was still in the airline world. And from there, I went to Delta Airlines. And then after that, out of the blue, I got a call from Turner Time Warner. So I started in advertising, media marketing, then into CPG retails, then, consulting private equity. So it's been everywhere in every industry. I think maybe healthcare is the only one I haven't touched, but pretty much, but it's all the same type of problems, correct? Different problems, but well, there is some similarity in some problems, some are different, but it's all the same toolkit, correct? That I know very well that you could use anywhere.
Wow. Can you indulge me a second? Because, I think now we all understand that algorithms and computing handles all of the heavy lifting for the airline industry. But what was it like before all that? Because I'm imagining, like, if you remember, like, the movies from like the 70s and 80s, there was the air traffic.
Okay, so the industry was regulated until I think when it was the Carter administration. I mean, I was a kid, but from my reading the history, in 79, if I'm not mistaken, the government took the decision to deregulate the industry. What does that mean? Before that, the government decided where to fly, how you price, what you do. It was basically ruled by government entities on how to run an airline. But long story short, when deregulation have happened, then all these airlines like, well, what do we do now? How are we going to decide also? In some sense, they were posed these questions that they never thought of. And then this is what created, correct? This whole area, this whole movement of data for the airlines. And the first thing that they solved is a problem that you know very well, maybe as a traveler, that sometimes flights get overbooked, correct?
Yeah.
Well, they figured out that sometimes people no show. And so you know what? Why are we leaving these seats, whatever, if we know 10% of people are really not going to show for the flight? So they figured out no show forecasting, cancellation forecasting. Then they started asking themselves much harder problem. Well, am I selling the inventory at the right time, at the right place for the right customer? So they figured out this whole area of revenue management. Then they said, well, where should we fly? Oh, then they created this whole models around network design. And then how do we recover a crazy schedule of thousands of flights when an ice storm hit or some blizzard now like today is hitting maybe the Northeast, correct? So what do we do? Then they created the whole flight scheduling, crew scheduling, etc. So all of this started from being forced in some sense to compete in an open now world after deregulation. But to your point, up until regulation, that there was no, in some sense, innovation because there was no need. It was a managed, correct industry by the government.
Wow. And so talk to me of those early days of you in the airline industry. And because at the time, the airline industry was super early on customer segmentation before anyone else was doing it. At that time when you were doing it, did you sense that this would change everything beyond the airline industry?
Well, I think everyone realized that we're coming into something when in the late 90s, the internet obviously came and the whole digital world became a reality. And that was going to change everything because suddenly when we were doing segmentation, it was in some aggregate level and a bucket level, these people that maybe have that price sensitivity versus whatever. So bucketing in some sense demand. But when digital came, the relationship between any business and a consumer became a one-to-one. And then it became much more personal, correct? Much more focused, much more capable of doing things you could never do before. So yes, we realize that with the digital world, this is going to open, a lot of things, but also it's going to make everyone capable of doing what the airline are doing. Every business can have a digital presence. Every business can track, customers. Every business can be much more, how we say, in tune with the demand of the marketplace, or with what Joe needs versus what Wes needs, correct? And obviously this opened a lot of things. That was really the revolution at the time. It was really the digital era. When the digital era launched, everything changed. We knew it was new era. And even for the airline, it became, a new era is just a new chapter, and a new chapter with new opportunities. I remember one of the things that we've done at the time when digital came is it allowed us to view what the competitors are doing, correct? Because when you have digital, every airline has its own digital presence. Right. So revenue management, which is what I described earlier, became something else. It became called Comp RM. Let me explain what's Comp RM. Comp simply means competitive revenue management. What is competitive revenue management? Well, I used to make these decisions on how to manage my inventory based on my demand forecasting and what I think I'm going to get in those different segments that you just described, Joe, correct? And how I should set up my inventory and whatever. Well, guess what happens with internet and with the digital world? Well, there is nothing that will stop you from finding out what other competitors are offering online. So people start writing bots that will collect, what's happening out there at my competition. So say, what, you think I have demand? You think I can raise my, do this, do that. So actually it started a new era of revenue management. So the point is, even with new, if you want to call it, when something new comes along, correct, whatever that is, it doesn't kill whatever. It just moves the solution to a new chapter, correct? An adaptation. So RM became Comp RM, and after that, it became consumer choice level modeling RM. So it continues to evolve as technology has evolved.
Wow, great stuff. And I'd love to get your take on this, because there is a lot of hyperbole around AI that says this is the greatest, technical revolution that will ever happen to mankind. And to me, I'm not the expert in this in the West, but I don't think you could top the internet. I think the internet is undefeated, as people joke on the online. The fact that you could connect the world at the touch of a button, speak to someone in seconds, video calls now. I don't know, it's hard to top that. But what do you think about the argument that people say that AI is going to be bigger than the internet?
Well, I mean, internet is a foundation, so it's still working over the internet. So certainly, the internet is still there, an enabler. But what does AI do? I mean, I think I was thinking of, I was at a meeting and, someone was talking. This is not even like the calculator came. This is like the printing press. This is like the printing press moment. When the printing press moment happened, I mean, look what happened to Europe. The Renaissance started, the new era of enlightenment, of learning, of whatever. I actually would like to think of it as such a printing press moment, not a calculator moment. It's even bigger than that. And if it is as big as such, in my opinion, then it's not to shy away from it. We simply need to learn how we work with AI going in the future. Not to say, oh, it's taking my job. No, this is a tool. This is a printing press moment. This is new technology. How do I take it? How do I adapt it? How do I use it to still bring value, correct, to the things that I'm interested in, to the business I want to run? That's what I think.
Yeah, it feels like we're in a moment in time, we're recording this in early 2026, about people finding out how you make money in this. Because we are seeing how people are investing in it, where it's billion-dollar companies investing trillions of dollars into this. And my worry is, and I think for many people, is Wall Street's going to wake up one day and say, great, love innovation, love growth, where's the profits? Is that where you feel like, this AI bubble that people keep mysteriously discussing, that it's going to happen? Do you see that coming sooner than later?
Well, there are two things here going on. So let's talk maybe about opportunities. Are there opportunities today that you can make with AI? Yes. I was involved. I can't go through all the details, but I will simply say I was involved with an entity that had quite a bit of companies, and they wanted to basically see if there are opportunities to cut costs. So imagine, for example, the procurement space. Imagine if you have a lot of companies and big companies, and each one of them tens of billions of dollars, every company. Am I paying this vendor too much here and too much there? And we're talking tens of thousands contract. What were the details of every contract? I mean, actually, companies do that. They bring an army of people every year to review them. Well, guess what? AI could do this very simply. And then you can basically surface through a dashboard the KPIs that you're interested in, the things that you're tracking, and then you can suddenly identify opportunities to cut costs. I can't discuss the actual numbers, but I'm going to tell you, the ROI on this project was more than 100 times, not 10 times, 100. So whatever was spent, what the company realized was more than 100 and identified savings. It justified all of it. Now, when you talk about the bubble, I think, one of the main things that I think, may hinder or slow down a little bit, but I don't see us, I don't see AI going into a cold winter like they used to say, no, but is actually the compute cost. The compute cost of AI is sometimes what I'm seeing as something that hinders to bring the value. So one thing, for example, on the procurement project, it would have been very bad if we allowed simply people to query, correct, and the data over and over and over. But once we realize actually there's a bunch of things we need to surface, we can allow that interaction with whatever and keep the cost manageable and still realize the ROI. I think there are going to be advancement, in my personal opinion, in technology, especially around the chip area. I don't know if people know, when we say the compute cost is so high of AI, you know why it's so high?
Electricity.
Well, yeah, but why? It's because of the lot of the movement of the data rather than the actual compute at the last step. It's the memory bringing in the data and bringing out the data. It's that whole data. There are technologies and there are companies. Actually, I met one company not long ago where they're working on solving this problem. And I was talking to their CEO, and I was blown away by the technology. If these guys succeed in the coming few years on, for example, cutting the cost of compute and memory management, that there is the AI is back, but is not going to be back, gone. That's what I mean. Long story short, even if we whatever, I don't see this AI going away. These problems will be resolved, correct? These problems, people are thinking about them. How do you say, the genie is out and there's nothing's going to put back the genie back in. So the question is how we manage that. And also, in my mind, how do we get people to have a say, correct, of where this technology go? And, that was one of the things, one of the reasons that I think, you and I, when we were talking, why I wrote the book, correct, Data Independence, because, one of the things that was on my mind, well, how do we get people to participate in those decisions? And then the way I thought about it, well, if you give them back their data, correct? Because if you give back the data and people can, quote unquote, data vote, then guess what? Then they can make those decisions where this technology should go and where their data, should be used or not used for. So this is it. But I don't think it's gone. The genie is out, and I'm pretty sure all these problems will be resolved.
Great, excellent. All right, so you mentioned the book. Let's plug it here. Data Independence. And I was curious because writing it felt like you were making the pivot from builder of all those, obviously the career we've been talking about, to a reformer. Was that transition gradual, or was it triggered by like a single event?
Actually, it was triggered by an event. It was an aha moment, I'm going to call it. I was working on a patent, which is called something along the line, contextual ad scheduling with sentiment. So let me explain. We thought with this mathematical modeling and our understanding of data that we can put the right context in advertising in front of Joe. But also understanding a little bit more of Joe, we can put even the ad that probably will trigger a particular sentiment or feeling. And I thought, oh my God, we're so smart. I'm doing all of this. And then, but then, I paused and I was like, who am I to have the right to come across as if I'm manipulating Joe's feeling and sentiment? That was the aha moment. I felt it went too far. It was all within the law, within the data, whatever. And that was really the aha moment. I was like, oh, this is getting too much. There must be a better way. And the better way is actually to participate. Let Joe participate, correct? Let Joe be aware. and let Joe make the decision of what he wants, doesn't want, and where his data goes. So there was an aha moment. There were some gradual, but that aha moment changed everything. I still remember that day. I was like, okay, there must be a better way. This is too much.
And that was sort of like the birth of the framework of consent, control, and currency, which gives power back to individuals. So in plain English, was this sort of your attempt to balancing something out that you felt got out of balance?
Yes, that is exactly right. So the idea is that if we don't have privacy, we don't have freedom. And I make that case very strongly, I hope, in chapter 1. And if someone doesn't believe that, then they should return the book and not continue reading. But if you believe that, and I make the case why privacy and freedom are one, then how do we solve that situation, that problem? The problem is solvable. The data at the end of the day is not anyone's data except the individual. They're generating the data. It's their data. So this is what I went about the framework. Let the individual, the citizen, I don't want to even call them a consumer, the citizen, decide about consent, about control, and how to currency their data. To currency their data simply means how they can benefit from it potentially, but really, how do they want it to be used? In some sense, the use cases. So the idea is that you give the individual this, if you want to call it, concept of a personal data vault key, and let them decide in the market with recognized entities in the market who they're the one that give their data, because these folks can then use their data based on the values, on the things that they would like to see. So in some sense, when you invest your money, you go to Fidelity, Ameriprise, Charles Schwab, whoever, correct? It shouldn't be different. The data is yours. You decide who you want to whatever and how you want to, this data to be used. The thing that I think is always happening is that we simply have more laws that don't work. We have a hodgepodge of laws in 50 states. Every state has different laws. And there isn't really a federal whatever. And honestly, the Federal Trade Commission tries to do something, and I commend them, but they're using, how would you say, tools from, I don't know, 60 and 70 and 80 years ago to debate some technology that's new. I think they really should think about the data problem more like the SEC. The SEC doesn't tell you where to invest your money, does it? No. But what does the SEC does? The SEC does make sure that the market is transparent, is accountable, is protective, is equal, and is respectful. I call it taper. So that's what I call. So I said the FTC should become more like the Federal Data and Trade Commission, FDTC, and should really become more like an SEC in protecting what people do with their data. But people have to make those decisions, because with people making those decisions, then you have the opportunity where everyone participates in this AI economy and decides where AI takes us. Because my concern is that we end up in a situation where humanity is serving technology and not technology serving humanity. And to leave it for 5-6 billionaires, whatever, and the smartest people on the planet, allegedly, is not going to get us to a better place. You see now all the lawsuits, correct? What was found about social media and what companies knew about the impact of social media on children. And that was very. Do you really want another chapter like this with AI? No. I think all of us should participate, go to whatever, decide where our data goes, and in some sense we have decided. Hopefully, we'll decide collectively the right decision. I'm not saying we always make the right decision, but hopefully, the idea, correct, of a democracy, in some sense, a data vote, that on average you end up being better off than few people making the decision for you, and that's really my hope.
And so the billion-dollar question, though, Wes, is here: are there going to be enough people to care? We all kind of live with trade-offs, right? So people know the trade-off of like, hey, Facebook is free for me to interact with all my friends, all the things I love, but they'll get my data. I don't mind having Amazon Alexa in my house because I love having a virtual assistant in my house that I could speak to. I know that it's probably listening to me all day long, sucking up all my information and using it later on. There's a big section of the population, Wes, that doesn't mind that. How do you get enough people to rally around to be like, no, you really should have more control about this?
Yeah. The proposal doesn't mean that we're cutting off all these services. It is really more about awareness, correct, that these things are happening. Not many people know that, my mom or friends tell me, oh, I said something on the phone and suddenly I got the ad. Well, yeah, that's because you didn't know that you were listened to, etc.
Right.
But it goes back. So let me go back to what you asked, is that we don't have any privacy and people don't know that we don't have any privacy. And once you lose privacy, you lose freedom. So people tell me, well, I have nothing to hide. Well, why care about free speech? Because you have nothing to say. Okay, so let's cancel free speech too. Because you have nothing to say. I mean, the argument doesn't make sense. So the point is not to take away services and things that people enjoy and whatever, but if they realize that actually they will say, you know what, maybe I don't want that. And I give examples. I think I do create 5 characters in the book, and I show their journey and what they decide to do with their data in this new world versus if they don't do in the current world and where this could lead. The other thing, you know, something when I talk to my kids, you know, and then we got into this discussion, then they got interested because, oh, I can make money out of my data. For example, do you know how much is the ad industry in the United States alone? How much is it?
I'm sure it's trillions.
It's $1 trillion approximately between digital. $1 trillion. What about all the other industries? If you think CPG retail, it's also in the, well, I'm not double counting by saying the advertising modeling where CPG retail. Well, how's the data used? Did you ever wonder why the thing that you just ordered always show up the next day and is available in the warehouse in your area? It's because they have understood the demand of every person in a geographic whatever. And so the supply chain is whatever. They know even what you will buy probably before you even decide what you're going to buy next. Correct, based on what this is. So the point is, it's not to take this away. It's simply to say, be aware that there is room for you to use this data. But if we don't get back this ownership of our own data, we will end up in a situation worse than what now we're seeing in course regarding social media and the lawsuit against some social media companies about what they knew when they knew about, you know, the impact on children. This will be far worse if there is no awareness and no, in some sense, national discussion, correct, on what to do with this. And it's not to say we don't want those services, but let's have those services tailored to each one's liking and acceptance of what's okay or not okay for them.
Excellent. Let's wrap this up, Wes, with a sliding doors question, because you talked about rebelling as a youth and deciding to be an engineer against your mother's wishes. Have you ever thought what your life would have been had you just been the good young boy and mama's boy and listening to what he said and become a doctor, or what your life would have been like? Have you ever thought about that alternative life that you might have had?
Maybe I got to appreciate medicine more when I had my own kids. You know, and I really started appreciating that. And in particular, in one case with one of my kids who had some health problems. So I got really to appreciate that. And I said, oh, wow, I would have, you know, because I found the passion, but it was a different point and for different reason. No, I don't look back. I don't look back, but I do appreciate, you know, what I've seen with what doctors could do, especially doctors with heart that are very committed to the patient. And but no, I love what I do. But you know, who knows? Maybe there is a third chapter between aerospace and now, you know, data science, and I don't know. Maybe writing books and articles. Maybe is my third. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the third chapter is. But I think there is a third chapter.
Excellent, Wes. If folks want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, where should they start?
They can go to weschar.com. You know, there is obviously a form over there that they can fill in case they have questions. I think that's the easiest way. Wes Chaar, ch2as1r.com.
Excellent, Wes. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you, Joe. Thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to talk to you and to your audience. Thank you.
And that'll do it for this episode. If you're an entrepreneur ready to grow your industry recognition as an author and entrepreneur.com contributor, go to authorities.entrepreneur.com.